Thing that I love the most about my property is this. My landform, or geography, or it's what I call good topography. And the geography, the shape of your property, can help you in so many ways. It can also really hinder you in so many ways. And in the case of my property, as the snow is just starting to melt here, you can see I live on a very topographic property. In fact, from the bottom of my driveway to where my house, the cabin we live in, and actually where the house we're constructing sits, is 300 feet or 100 meters of elevation change from the bottom to the top. Actually, to the top of my property, which we don't have any stuff built on, we have the top of a ridge, which is about another 100 feet higher, which is actually where I keep my water cisterns, so that I pump water up to those cisterns, and in the growing season they gravity feed down to all the various irrigation that I have on portions of the property. But it's an example of good topography. And one thing that's great about good topography is it can actually help you protect you from your climate. So, case in point, in my particular example here, we live in what's referred to as a zone, or a USDA zone 5, but we're a DFB climate under the climate classification system. And I talked in the last video about climates. And there's all kinds of different climates out there. But we're in a DFB, which means we're a boreal, high elevation climate in Canada that gets winter. We have a cold and snowy winter, but we have a hot and dry summer. And I love this climate. It's the climate I'm most familiar with. Actually, I grew up in a BSK climate, which is a semi-arid desert, but in Kelowna, BC, where I was born and raised, it's actually surrounded by DFB and DFA, or DFB and DFC climates, which means there's a lot of boreal around it. But I'm familiar with this climate, and something that's so great about how the geography that I live in here, how it helps me weather the storm of the climate that I'm in, is we've got this topography, and the aspect is south and southeast. So right now I'm facing directly south. I'm actually filming this video right around noon, and a lot of my property is facing the south, which is really good in regards to growing. But because of the fact that I have a mountain higher behind me, which shelters me from the prevailing wind, which is mostly coming from the northwest, blowing to the southeast. That's the prevailing wind that comes down on the Pacific coast. And we have this mountain, this little bit higher than us, that as the prevailing wind comes in, it hits that mountain and it blows over us. And we have this fantastic little microclimate here that creates optimal conditions for growing, because we're actually a climate zone warmer, or more potentially, because of our aspect, which is so important. I spent the last 2 months developing this online course called Finding the Perfect Homestead Property. And if you want to just check out more about it, get on our waiting list, head over to homestead.freedomfarmers.com and check it out. And with this course, my hope is that I can teach thousands of people how to analyze and evaluate property so that they can make the best and most educated decision to make a purchase to get yourself on the land. That's what I want to do. So for the rest of this video, I want to give you some more examples of what good topography is. I'm also going to give you some examples of what poor topography is. And this is a snippet of what it looks like inside of this course that we've built. So let's cut to that now. Here are some examples of really good topography. This is Sangerfield, New York, 12 acres. It's a great example of good topography. Interesting geography. There's some dynamics to it. We've got some slope. We've got a beautiful south-facing slope here. We're not so low in the valley here that that this mountain next to us would shade us out during the winter. The mountains aren't steep enough for that, but you would get a huge microclimate advantage on a south-facing slope like that. This property also just has good topography in the sense that there's other opportunity zones. So we've already got some fields in here which could be used for any number of crop growing, and we've got a good amount of trees in here and a low point on the property which could be used to build a pond, and it already is sort of marshy there, so that could just be developed further, and you could catch a ton of snowmelt and rain off of this and just drain it all down into here and catch it there naturally. This is Petersburg, Tennessee, and it's a great example of really good topography. We've got some nice topography with our own little, we're nestled. It's almost like you're sitting in the butt crack of a sort of a pair of legs. It's kind of funny, but really, really cool topography. You got the area, the primary area, the main homestead area is relatively flat and has good access and is easy to get through. But then you've got this whole, call it 80-90% of the rest of the property. This is 41 acres. That's all wild. And you've got shelter from the topography. This creates microclimates, microclimates out in the field, nice, warm and exposed, sheltered and cool in the trees, less windy in the trees. Just a great example of interesting topography that is beneficial in so many different ways, with the flats in the primary area, and then your wild area is just dynamic, mountainous, and interesting. You just imagine the lifestyle that this would provide for kids and animals that you might keep, wild crafting, hunting, you name it, having that much of a wild area, but not just that's flat and just easy to meander through, but sort of interesting and dynamic. Just beautiful topography. Also, this type of topography would allow you to collect water very easily. That there would be a catchment point somewhere where, in the event of big rains, which happen in Tennessee, you could move water one way or the other and potentially have some kind of pond infrastructure down here if you so desired. And here again are some examples of what really poor topography looks like. And remember, these examples are pulled directly from the course we've built. This is Ogallala, Nebraska, 10 acres. And this is Zone 5. And it's an example of a poor geography, a fail on geography, in the sense that there's not much to it. There's a little bit of topography, but there's also a lack of a lot of other things which cause intersections. So I'm saying that this is a fail in geography, but it's also the fail in vegetation and wildlife also makes it more of a fail in a geography. The sense that there is some amount of topography here. We've got this secondary ridge here coming into this little valley, and another secondary ridge here, primary ridge being up here off the property. But this, bringing this, you got some potential water capture in here. You could do things like that, but there's no trees here. So the lack of the poor vegetation and wildlife exacerbates the not great geography. It's not enough topography for me. I like to see more variation. But this also intersects with microclimate, meaning that there's no microclimates here. It's all of the same. Whereas if we had vegetation and wildlife and a little bit better geography, even if you just exaggerated what was already here, we would have potentially more microclimates. And it's interesting how these things intersect, but it's an example of poor geography, just not enough there. This is Frenchtown, Montana, and it's an example of good topography. However, in order to utilize this property, you would have to put a lot of work into it. So I like good topography, but if you're going to have good topography, if you don't have good access, then it can be a challenge. And the main reason here is that there isn't very much on this property. This was just a bare piece of property. It's 42 acres, 42 and a half acres. And there's really only a small landing that's actually usable. So call it the area that's in and around the road, the landing. There is sort of this not a very big area that you could just come in and utilize. 1.2 acres about. So yes, the property has good topography. I love topography. And actually, when we did the full profile on this property, we discovered that we would be able to actually capture a ton of snowmelt here and then bring it out on contour onto the property with probably irrigation lines, like prime 100, 1.25 inch lines. Running swales doesn't really make sense, or even ditches in the long of a way. But you could basically very passively move water from a natural catchment across it. So the property has some cool aspects to it. It's just that when you evaluate something's topography or geography or landform, you're evaluating what's usable to you for the most part. And there's very little that's usable here at the moment. So this would be considered a fail for topography. Doesn't mean that the property fails. It just means that you need to recognize that if you're going to come in here, you've got 40 acres, but you really only have 1.5 acres that you can actually use right away, meaning you have to craft everything else. All right, if you guys found that helpful and you want to learn more, head over to homestead.freedomfarmers.com. Sign up for that waiting list. Very shortly, we'll send you some more information about the course, early bird pricing, and the release date. And I look forward to seeing many of you in there. And I really hope that this course can help you use the eyes and learn from my experience on how to evaluate a property effectively and efficiently.